Credit card and electronic fund transfer transactions can be made through Denari in a variety of ways. For example, donors can donate by credit card or EFT through Denari's online community web portal. Credit card and EFT transactions can be made as part of ongoing donations using donor pledges, and credit card transactions can be made through gift records as one-time donations. Each type of transaction is handled in its own way and is covered in other videos. You'll find the details of ongoing pledge transactions in the videos on pledges, the one-time credit card transactions in the gift videos, and the online community information in those videos. So we won't go over those details here. In this video, we will discuss the general overview of how credit card and EFT transactions work and the process for managing them once the gifts have been made. It is important to understand that Denari does not process the transactions. Denari uses a third-party company or processor. Denari simply passes the information through to them. They process the transaction and deposit the money in your bank account. It is also important to know that Denari does not store credit card or EFT information. The reason is that Denari is not PCI compliant. PCI is a security standard set by the credit card industry. Your processor account is compliant. They meet all of the standards and are audited on a regular basis. You may occasionally have donors who express concerns about the safety of their credit card or EFT information, and you can assure them that it's being stored in that PCI environment. Your account with the processor is managed by a third-party company called Practical Business Solutions. They are responsible to set up your account and to ensure that the money is transacted and deposited to your bank account. So the first step in using credit cards and EFTs with Denari is to contact them. If you need the contact information, you can use the support button in Denari and they'll give you the information. Once Practical has set up your account, they will send the account information to the Denari support staff. They will then, in turn, use that to connect Denari to your processor account. At that point, you're ready to go. It's important to highlight here that you own the account with the processor. They manage the money side of things, while Denari is simply passing the information through to them. Let's look now at a pledge as an example of how credit card or EFT entry works. The process is the same whether it's a pledge, a gift record, or through online community. So I'll click on the names button here on the left, then name list management, and I'll select a donor, and then finally pledges. And now I can select the pledge that's already here. At the bottom, we have the credit card section, and I'll click the button to add a payment. And that gives me the credit card fields. When you enter the card information here and click validate, the information goes directly to your processor account. They bundle the information into a single record there. In other words, the card number and the expiration date become a single record. They then send back a code that represents that record to Denari. From now on, anytime Denari uses that credit card for a transaction, it sends the code to the processor. They then match that to their stored record to use for the transaction. That process then reduces the number of times the card or bank information travels over the internet. Also, when you click validate, the processor company will run a validation amount, usually a penny, through the process just to set up the card. That amount will show on the donor's bank record temporarily, but will be removed. Setting up EFTs are similar, although you have an Add Edit button here under the EFT section. Click that, a little window will open where you'll enter the bank information. The information is handled in the same way as with credit cards. It goes directly to the processor. Once the transactions have been made, your job is now to verify that the batch is accurate and then close the batch. So let's go to the Gifts and Pledges button here on the left, and we'll find a batch. Here you see a variety of different types of batches. As we scroll on down the page here, you'll see a gift card batch, you see a DOL user interface, an online community batch, etc. Whenever you see online community gift batch or an automatic credit card or EFT batch, you know you have some things to do. Now let me stop here to be sure everyone understands that an automatic batch is one that runs on a scheduled basis. It is set up in a pledge with a next transaction date. On that date, Denari runs the credit cards or EFTs that are set to run that day and creates the batch. You can get more specific information about that process in the video on pledges. So let me click on the OLC batch here. And the process now is the same. No matter how a batch gets created, whether by pledges or one-time gifts or any methodology for producing a credit card batch or an EFT batch, the process is exactly the same. First, notice here that I have a control total amount here, but when you come to this field, there will be no control total there. The reason is that Denari creates a new batch with the first online community gift of the day. If there are other gifts through online community for that day, Denari puts them in that batch. So Denari doesn't know what the total of the batch will be. You can check the gift sum field and then put that amount in the control total field and hit save, and that's what I had done earlier. And that will cause the batch to then balance. The same is true for an automatic batch. Denari doesn't know at that point that it creates the gift record which transactions will be successful and which will not, so it creates a batch with no control total. Your next responsibility is to click the Download Processor Results button at the top of the page on the right. That downloads the latest information from FrontStream. It does not come to Denari automatically. Once you've done that, the Close Batch button will appear at the top of the page. Now here's where credit cards and EFTs differ. Credit cards run immediately, and you know immediately if the transactions are successful. That is not true for EFTs. They have to run through the banking process, and officially we're told that that could take up to 10 days, but usually it's 1 or 2. When you click to run Download Processor Results, if it is a credit card batch, Denari will find out at that point which credit cards were not successful and remove them from the batch. At the same time, if this were a recurring pledge transaction rather than a one-time gift, it would change the next transaction date in the pledge to move it ahead by 2 days. It will then try the transaction again at that point. If it's unsuccessful, it will move it ahead again by another 2 days. If it fails a third time, it will change the status of the pledge to failed and will no longer attempt the transaction until you change the status back to live. If the batch is an EFT batch, Denari does not remove the gift automatically. The reason is that 10-day period when you're waiting on the banking process. If you run Processor Result Report 2 days after the EFTs have been sent off for processing, for example, some of the transactions may not have completed at that point, so we don't want to remove the gifts at that time. So Denari leaves it up to you to decide when the time is right. Once you're sure that an EFT transaction has failed, you can delete the gift record by opening the batch, selecting the gift record, and then hitting the delete button. Now go to the pledge and change the next transaction date so that it will run again when you're ready. So let's take a look at that. To do that, I'm going to go back to Names, Nameless Management, I'll select that name record again, and over here we'll choose Pledges. and then finally I'll select the pledge for this donor. Now in the electronic giving section you see the day of the month. That's the day that the donor has said that they want the transaction to occur, and then you have the next transaction date. The next transaction date is the actual date that this credit card or EFT transaction will run. You have complete control over when that happens. So as I mentioned earlier, if a credit card or EFT transaction fails and you want to put off rerunning it until you get updated information, you can simply delete the transaction date from that field or move it off into the future or handle that in any way you want. But again, the important thing here is that you control with this next transaction date field when this pledge will run. Down here at the bottom in the credit card section, we have the status field, as I mentioned earlier, and you can see that in order for a credit card to run, a credit card transaction to run, it must be set to live. And if it's put on hold, Denari will not run the transaction. And you have a number of different statuses here that you can use to control when and if this runs. As I mentioned earlier, also Denari will automatically set the status to failed or declined after this credit card has been attempted and failed 3 times. So again, you have some control here of when this credit card transaction will run. Here in the EFT section, we have the EFT status. There's a few less status options there, but you do have a few, and again, so that gives you control over this EFT as well. This is all covered in more detail in the video on pledges. So let's go back to the batch. So near the middle of the page here, you'll find 3 reports. The first one to look at is the credit card processor results report. Or if this were an EFT batch, it would say EFT processor results report. This report shows you the information that has come back from FrontStream and will assist you in making decisions about which transactions have processed and which have not, and which have been approved and which have not. In the case of EFTs, it will show which ones are still pending. This report is only reading the information that has been downloaded when you hit the Download Processor Results button. So if you come back 2 days from now, you should hit the button again to download the latest information. And you may have to check again in a few days to see if the EFTs are completed. Up above, we have reports called Gifts Not Attempted by Credit Card or EFT. To understand this report, you have to understand the process, especially for automatic transactions, the ones that are driven by the pledges that we just saw. When that process starts, the first thing that Denari does is create a gift record for each transaction. At almost the same time, it sends the credit card or EFT information to the processor. Occasionally, the information never reaches them because of some glitch either in the process or in the internet connections. This report shows you if there were gift records in this batch that were like that. It lets you know that the gift did not transact and was not even attempted. The pledge credit card status report shows you the pledges behind the transactions in the batch and provides some information like the change date, which is the date that Denari changed the next transaction date so that the pledge will run again. The gifts deleted from this batch report applies only to credit cards as we discussed above. When you run the Download Processor Results report, Denari removes the failed credit card transactions. This report shows you which ones were removed. Again, it does not do that. It does not remove the failed EFT transactions. It only works that way with credit cards. If this were an automatic EFT batch, you'll find a section called EFT notices over here. This subject is discussed in more detail in the video on pledges, but here's the overview. To legally hit someone's bank account on an ongoing basis, you must either have written permission from the donor in your files or notify the donor that a transaction has occurred and give them an opportunity to stop future transactions. You can tell Denari if you have written permission in the pledge record. If you don't have written permission, Denari will send notification by email to those donors that have email addresses in your data. If they don't have an email address, Denari will produce a printed document that you can print and put in the mail. This section provides a link to those statements. The statements, both emailed and printed, provide the legal language necessary and give the donor the ability to contact you and stop future transactions if necessary. Once you're satisfied that the batch is accurate and complete, you can now close the batch, just as you would any other batch, and that will then post the gifts to the donor's account. Occasionally, there's a need to reverse a credit card transaction, and that's easy to do through Denari. Let's go to the Gifts and Pledges button here on the left, and then Gift Reversal. Here, you'll enter a receipt number for the gift, or you can click the search icon to find the one that you want to reverse. Denari is going to create a special batch for this reversal. It's a reversal batch. If you leave this date field blank, Denari will use today's date as the date for the batch. Otherwise, enter the date that you want to have on that batch. At the top of the page here on the right, you have two options: No Credit Card Reverse Gift and Reverse Gift. If you click Reverse Gift, Denari will create the reversal within Denari and then reverse the credit card charge through the processor. So again, just Denari is actually reversing the credit card charge, and it's also reversing the gift record within Denari. If you click on No Credit Card Reverse Gift, Denari will create the reversal in Denari, but not the actual credit card transaction. In both cases, Denari will create a reversing transaction that will then show in the donor's gift history page to provide a record of the change. This process will not work with EFTs. You can use it to reverse the gift record within Denari, but you cannot reverse the transaction in a donor's bank account through Denari. You can, however, do that by contacting Practical Business Solutions. They can give you instructions or do the reversal for you. This concludes this video on credit cards and EFTs. As always, if you have any questions, you can contact tech support through the help button at the top of the page.